early this morning. We'll go ahead and get started. That's yeah. If you hadn't had your coffee, it's available over here. But go ahead and we'll get started on time. I do have, I know a couple of people en route that maybe are running just a little bit behind. Um, so that'll be good. And obviously, we've got a lot of data to talk about. The meeting is streamed and archived, which helps the situation. If anybody needs to go back and listen to it, even that's a member of the committee or participating, or those listening at home. Of course, this is the One Door Task Force that was established, a joint committee with the House and Senate. Chairman Bell is not able to be with us today, but we spoke yesterday. The Office of Workforce Development, Accelerate, has led a lot of the charge on the data that we're putting together. And I appreciate all the agencies and partners who have delivered on that data as we try to basically, to sum this thing up. It's called One Door, and that's pretty simplistic, but it is the intent that if anyone comes to any of our partners across state government that's a citizen of the state of Mississippi, that we are trying to say, how can we positively impact their lives? And whether it's from the community college side, which I think y'all have heard me say this before, but we have 52 senators, we have 82 counties, we have 15 community colleges. Two of those are in Senate District 5 that I represent with Northeast and Etowah Community College. So the community college program is obviously very important to me. I attended Northeast. I started to say one of those two, but I attended Northeast and certainly had a good experience there. I was a traditional 4-year student who then worked for about 7 years in industry. So it became very untraditional very fast. And then when I came back to school at the University of Mississippi, I walked onto campus technically as a non-traditional student. So I have experienced some of the challenges that often with people that we're seeing to be upskilled, to be educated, to have a change in career path. And so it is something that has tangible, real impact on Mississippians. The labor force participation rate, we've discussed that ad nauseum. I still haven't met an individual that's been surveyed ever for the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, but our number's up. So I'll just give you all that credit, still not knowing the mystery behind the math. But at the end of the day, that's what we're chasing are our own measurables. We know we have more people employed in the state of Mississippi, I think historically than we ever have. We probably got undercounted in the 2020 census. It is very clear that we have had economic development announcements that dwarf anything we've done in the past. We appreciate the work of everybody that's come before, but in particularly the last 6 years, we've had transformational investment in the state of Mississippi, and we've transformed the whole workforce process. And transformation is also known as change. And a lot of times people don't like change. It's uncomfortable. We created Accelerate Mississippi. I'm repeating a lot of things y'all already know, but I think that for the overall purpose, and for folks that would watch this to understand why we're doing what we're doing, is that we have a tendency in government to operate in silos, and you do a wonderful job in your own silo and you bring that data. But then the question becomes, as technology has become more readily available to crunch that data and to make it mean something, is that we haven't found a way to have synergy. When you literally see companies that merge, they talk about synergy. And I think that we can have that within state government without stepping on people's silos, but also challenging to get the best result. Because at the end of the day, the outcomes are more important, as far as the participants than the outcomes of the silos. So, I've told some of our university partners I care about your students' outcomes. And if we really, really focus on that, your institution's outcomes will be good. But we've tried to listen to business and industry. MDA and the governor's office has done an excellent job recruiting business to the state of Mississippi. But the challenges we have today is that we're not just recruiting for a low tax, good regulatory environment, all of the different things, speed to market, permitting. It's literally workforce and how we're able to use our partners, whether it's at the community college level, the university level, K-12, and that's kind of where we're hoping to come together. And so I do appreciate everybody doing that. If Chairman Bell was here, I'm sure he would say Daniel said everything I was going to say and used more words than he had to. But I do appreciate you being here today, and I will go ahead and Courtney, I will let you direct where we want to go at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator Sparks. I'd like to start just for a second, again, for the people listening later, and for everybody in the room, to kind of summarize a little bit of where we are and what we found, I think, as a system over the last few months. The thing that we found even a couple of years ago is that we were really good at writing plans and pulling together for that, but then we often would split apart and as you said, Senator, go back to our own silos, our own zip codes, to kind of get things done in our structure. And I think one thing I'll applaud the system on is they've done a really good job of working together to determine how we can better integrate all of this. And as we work with business and industry, as we work with education, it seems like the key to being able to truly advance and move forward is our ability to integrate our systems, our services, our opportunities across the board, not just from an adult ed and human services, perspective, but even from a working while receiving benefits kind of scenario. So as we move forward, I think the ultimate goal for the things that we're doing is to stop doing this wait until some date in the future or until somebody's checked their box and figure out how we can integrate the services to the point of one door at some level, integrate the services and get this done, work that would normally be done in the future, get it done today. And so that's kind of what we've each, the core agencies and some of our other agencies have kind of been talking about and working through is how do we do that differently in some cases, better in some cases. And the biggest thing that we keep coming back to, I think, is this need for data integration and modernization. And if any of the agencies in the room want to add anything or correct me if you think I'm wrong or misspeaking about something, please do not hesitate. But I think the thing we keep coming back to is our humans at the local level are doing a good job of getting people kind of corralled and pushed in the directions that they need to go in. Our systems are still a little bit weak. So that's something that we've determined and we're going to be working on until we can kind of get that moving in the right direction. It is very complicated. Most of us are not software experts trying to live through this. So as we talk about this next section where we're just going to talk through some of these data responses, and this is really heavy data, so we're not going to go super deep into all of the data points. But Senator, you've got some of the data points. If you're a task force member, it's in the email invitation that you have. But I'd like for to allow our agencies an opportunity to kind of talk about their participant data, maybe some of their costs, if they're doing anything currently to adjust those costs or drive down especially the administrative costs. And maybe even highlight the employment outcomes and it'll kind of be a dealer's choice, whoever wants to talk about something. And I'd also request, Senator, if we could allow any of our local partners who wanted to talk about those things, because they're the ones that kind of, the system starts really wide, comes into the state, and then goes out really wide. So if there's anybody here that wants to talk about that today, we'd welcome that as well, if that works for you. So to get us kicked off, as the agenda states, we're just going to kind of review agency responses and let our agencies each kind of talk about that at a high level. Director Ashley, would you like to start talking about WIOA, thinking about your participant data, costs, anything that you want to highlight for the committee today?
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. As far as far as program year 2023, that's the latest data. We're also compiling program year 2024. That report will come out later this fall.
Real quick, for the purposes of the record, can you explain the program year and what that entails?
I say program year, that starts in program year 23, which would be July 1, 2023.
Okay.
So again, it's different than the fiscal year for the state of Mississippi. It's also different than the fiscal year for the United States federal government. So essentially, program year 23 is our complete stats. We're also working to do our reporting for program year 24, which ended this past June 30th, 2025. As far as 2023, a couple of highlights. Holistically, I know a couple of years ago or so when I got into the saddle, we had talked about working on our overhead and our costs and trying to make sure we directed those costs towards training. On the employment side of the house at MDES, Dr. Jason Pope came in August of 2024. We looked at staff, we looked at organizational structure. We used to have 4 area directors that worked with our local workforce development areas. Out of the 4 areas, we had 4 directors. Now we have 2. We have a north and a south. Took some significant overhead out there with that. We have one for, I guess, both the partnership, Mississippi Partnership Delta. Then we have one for the Twin Districts as well as South Central Mississippi Works. So those are working quite well. I know we have our directors here for the local workforce development areas that may want to add light to that or shed a light on that as well. From some things from the standpoint of engagement, we worked to make sure that we had engagement from both the local area with the people, and then also with Adam Todd working to engage businesses. And again, the Governor's Job Fair Network, or Governor's Job Fair, is a very important tool in which we do that. So again, we work with shaving costs mostly on personnel. And again, we're sharpening the pencil as it relates to facilities. I know Guy Martin and our locals have done an excellent job, and also our operators have done an excellent job on working with getting the best deal for the rent. As we know, real estate is very pricey given interest rates and other opportunity costs. Given the fact that we also have this great economic boom occurring in the state, everything's getting more expensive. So again, some great strides there. Again, with managerial talents of Jason Pope, who's running everything from working in a local community college workforce division to running a campus and also working with people. So we've done quite well there. Make sure we shifted that. A couple of highlights from program year 23. Again, this is in the packet. And we have essentially small differences because when we report the data and we have changes, we have 3 years to spend federal money. It's not like the federal government gets on that. So there could be differences in the 2 tabs of the spreadsheet. But looking at program year 2023, how much of every WIOA dollar does Mississippi put into career and training services? We're a top 10 state. Again, I would expect this to look different when we report program year 24. Again, I took the reins of MDES April 1st, 2024. So hopefully we'll see a marked difference in these costs. But again, we're a top 10 state. We spend about 54%, 54.8% of our money on training. For comparative purposes, looking at other states above us, we spend total $25.25 million on these programs, both on career and training. And that compares to other states above us like Alabama at 26.4, as well as Arizona at 26.9. Given other states that are ahead of us, they're spending $12 million, $12 million, $4 million, so you get the picture. So again, overall, we're making sure the biggest bulk of our money is going to training, and hopefully now with further revisions in how we do operating costs, further dollars down the road will be spent toward training. As it compares to our immediate neighbors, we're third behind both Louisiana and Alabama as far as a percent that goes toward training. Again, for comparative purposes, we're spending $13.8 million on training, whereas Louisiana is spending only $8 million. Okay, so that's significant. Also, as far as the wider Southeast band, what I call the wider Southeast band in the spreadsheet, it's ETA Region 3, ETA DOL Region 3 out of Atlanta. Again, we're number 2 out of that wider band, which that includes Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So again, at the top of the pile there. As it relates to some of the workforce outcomes for participants in WIOA adult, the national average was 4,978 participants served. Mississippi served significantly more than the national average at 5,798. And again, as far as outcomes, you're looking at retention at both second quarter and fourth quarter. Again, there's a rolling 3 cohorts here. So each one of these cohorts in the second quarter and fourth quarters from years prior. The main thing though is that we have the largest percentage of those people engaged in jobs versus the nation as a whole. Again, we're competing quite well against our contiguous states and also ETA DOL Region 3. Dislocated worker, again, the national average is 3,434. Mississippi served in program year 23, 4,715. Again, similar outcomes as it relates to participation in the second and fourth quarter, and the top 5 or so in the country as well. A couple of highlights there as it relates to Wagner Pizer. Excuse me. Wagner Pizer, of the 51,200 some odd people served out of all of these WIOA programs, inclusive Wagner Pizer, which that would be Title I and Title III. We work about 70% of them or so directly through Mississippi Department of Employment Security through Mississippi Works. And that's 39,000 people that went through Wagner Pizer and were served. Again, we're swinging at the top. We're a little bit under the national average, which is 45,000 participants. We serve 39,000. Closest neighbor to the west would be Arkansas at 57,000. Okay, so the main thing is I like to look at our statistics as compared to the nation, as compared to contiguous states, as well as Region 3 DOL. Like all great coaches, we can always do better. We're now making sure that we have training and working with our core partners to make sure we're cross-training. I think that's an important thing as well. And we're looking at better ways to better package costs using technology to hopefully use more technology versus manpower or human power. So that's our goal. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Stables.
Use your microphone. Just for the internet.
Well, good morning. Yes. Again, when you're talking about WIO adult, that's the main line. Also, just look at a worker. You know, we're having about 3,256 for that year, program year 2023 out of the program year. Again, this was previous data, so that's who was left at the second quarter. Also, fourth quarter that year, again, a different cohort. These are, when you talk about this data, you got 3 rolling cohorts here. Participants served now during this current year. We won't know the outcomes. Again, we're looking at lag data as it relates to unemployment insurance statistics that come every quarter. Okay, so we have certain waypoints the federal government wants us to activate. So at fourth quarter, second quarter, again, these are, again, 3,200, 3,700. Again, that's WIO adult. As it relates to dislocated worker, again, we're talking about second quarter jobs, 2,129, fourth quarter jobs, 2,093. So again, we're dealing with people that have barriers to the labor force, programmatically inclusive of some other programs, which would be Jobs for Veterans, state grant programs, whatnot. We serve about 54,000 people in program year 2023. Just the WIO programs, just the Title I, II, III, we're talking about 51,276. So that's the program scale. Now, prior to the pandemic, we're over, I think, basically 100 some odd thousand. Yes, so we're basically coming out of the pandemic. We've had an ascent from about the mid 40s to now 54,000 or so. Again, that's inclusive of other programs that are not necessarily WIO. So when we say the first barrier is people that have low income, and those people would have probably TANF, they would be SNAP participants. So that's the baseline as it relates to barriers to the labor force. We have others. And again, that data would be inclusive. I think there's my citation in the report. It's in the very middle if you want to look at that.
Bill, one thing I appreciate in the report that you sit in, there's basically an insight section that says what the patterns say on the last tab, on the last tab, and I appreciate that because I think that's one place that we've discovered, at least in our office, that as a whole, when it comes, we traditionally have spent more time on the training side of it and not on the human services side. So I don't want to ignore. Samantha, do you want to come sit up here? Come on. Anybody else, y'all feel free to take a seat at the table. But one of the things that y'all recognize is that we have high placement, which your numbers indicate, but a lower pay profile. And that is something that we just have to be really direct and realistic about in Mississippi is we do have lower wages. However, you acknowledge that, but then also say there's a need to push sector strategies towards higher wage occupation. And then a little bit further down, recognize that there are some other efforts in the state to get more people in what we call the high priority areas.
Yeah, specifically when you start talking about apprenticeship, the Mississippi Apprenticeship Accelerator, MAP, Mississippi Apprenticeship Program that's within MDES. I know we have Reconnect, we have other state efforts as well. What those do is signal to the market that we have the capacity and the willingness, but again, to get that higher salary, we have to train people for the higher value-added industry. When you start talking about manufacturing specifically, 140,000 some odd jobs in manufacturing in Mississippi, but only 60 some odd thousand that are what would be considered advanced industries. And again, my definition for advanced industries is the Brookings Institute. You can read that and Google that. But again, basically, advanced industries are industries that make tools with tools. Okay, so when you start talking about automobiles, we're using tools to make, again, the automobile. If you've been into an automobile or OEM factory, you'll know that there's a lot of, it's not manual labor. It requires elbow grease, but there's a lot of training for operation of machinery, et cetera. Again, industrial maintenance, I know that that's supported through apprenticeship programs. So essentially what apprenticeship programs do, in my mind, they're preparing you to operate or maintain. I know when you look at construction, you got to build the physical plant. When you're talking about installation and maintenance, you got to maintain it. Okay, when you start talking about actually doing it, production, very important. Again, producing with tools. And then finally, transportation and warehouse, so you got to get the product out and gone. So again, most of that's going to be within your priority occupation areas. So the goal is to upskill the people that have the barriers to the labor market, and then hopefully they can catch on with one of these higher value-added industries. For example, I don't know if I'm talking too long, just wink at me. Historically, you're dragging a bag and you're putting cotton in it for what, 30, 50 cents a pound, fluctuated like crazy. Later textiles, you're talking about a bowl of fabric, then you're talking about a furniture operation in Northeast Mississippi in the 40s. Again, you're selling a recliner for not 30 or 40 cents a pound, but you're selling for $300. Early 2000s, we start making steel. We also have an OEM. Early 2000s, 20 some odd years ago, again, a $35,000 vehicle. So you see that the value chain, as the value chain increases, the skill sets have to improve as well if we want to capture that higher earning as it relates to the median wages. So again, the good thing about this data, it's accurate based on what the employers are telling us every 3 months. The bad thing about this data is it's not as happy as it would be, because as great as we are on retaining, our median income increase is last. Again, that's more of the demand side per se versus the supply side. So I think by looking around, most people in this room are the supply side. I'll shut up after this, but just because you make a lot of fishing poles in Arizona doesn't mean you're going to have more people fishing in an arid, dry state with a desert. Okay, so again, we have to make sure that we're pairing what we're doing with the demand side. And again, the demand side is very important to listen to. I guess basically sing not only from the hymnal, but the right page to the song that everybody wants to hear. So again, we got to make sure that we're listening to the demand side and producing what it is that they desire.
The demand side is also notorious for getting hard information from. So good detailed information is what we're working on right now. One final question for me, at least, and not exact, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but can you give kind of a high level overview for what funding for the titles that you oversee has been like for the last maybe 3 to 5 years, and drawing on all the crystal balls you have right now, what does it look like for the next year or so?
Well, I'll say this, that we're a very frugal agency. My forebears were very frugal. As it relates to government shutdown, now, we're 100% federally funded. But at the same time, though, we've done well with our resources. Now, as far as program year 23, the total we owe award amount was $31.5 million. Program year 24, which is just ending, it goes from 31.5 to 28.7. Okay. Program year 25, we can see here it's going to be 25.8. So 31.5 down to 25.8. So again, we can only sharpen our pencils so sharply. I know the reality is we have to be in a place that's accessible. We do use technology. I know South Central Mississippi Works has done an excellent job of pioneering a data access center, a digital access center. So those are some tools. And again, but the hard fact is we have less dollars, that's less people served. Okay. Now we can keep sharpening our pencil and keep trying to work the equation. I mean, like I said earlier about the coaching analogy, we're still going to work out. We're still going to practice. We're still going to get them to go to class. Okay. But at the same time, we only have so many pennies, as you're saying, that's a declining state. Now, as it relates to currently, there's the current government shutdown. Again, I don't know what we can do about that. I think there were several votes last week. So that's out of our hands per se. We're basically working with what we have. I think ultimately, though, we've been good stewards, our state has. And I think if we continue to work on being intentional, as you and Accelerate Mississippi has done, then I think we'll be better off. So
I lied. I have one last question. Have y'all done anything, and he doesn't know this question is coming, but it's a pretty easy question. Have y'all done anything to maybe pull some additional funds into the system from the feds?
Well, as far as industry training dollars, I know we had applied before they went dark on us, and the state of Mississippi got $5.7 million. Again, that will be for training specifically. We're working with twin districts on that grant. Is for essentially advanced industries, and again, shipbuilding is an advanced industry, so it helps with our one of our biggest industries in the state as it relates to advanced industries. Prepare again, work for the future. Again, it's more than just jobs; it's also safety of the nation, and of course, there's a lot that goes with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Couple things quickly. Sometimes we use acronyms and terminology and we assume the general public understands it. But when you're talking about career versus training and you're talking about a training share, just briefly, what's the difference in the spend between career and training?
Career services, we're trying to match essentially the employers with the employees. You're helping them with anything from resume work, some soft skill training. It depends on what programs we have. I know, for example, the governor's job fair. I mean, we're setting up a market, if you will, to make sure that we have buyers and sellers together. Again, the business community and employers would work with hiring the people that show up at the job fair. Again, that's not training per se. So when we start talking about training, we're talking about ITAs, some other hard training dollars. They combine federal Pell Grants and other things, and package that for folks that are going through the adult, whether it be adult or dislocated programs with mostly our community colleges and other training providers on the list. So okay. Our training is versus, career services. I mean, let's make sure we're here on time, be dressed, be ready to answer these questions so we can do interview prep. I know we also do from the local level back to our call center. We can do orders for job orders. I know we had 132,000 some odd job orders. So we're taking those orders. We're talking to people, HR directors, and helping them either do it themselves with a call center phone call. They can do it online, or they can walk into Win Job Center. So those are career services.
Because when you talk about you rank only behind Alabama, you're talking about actual dollars that go into training.
Yes, dollars.
But a lot of other states are spending a whole lot more, and I won't call it admin because you have a separate category for admin, but this is the operation of the operation. It's just not training.
Well, training is you're putting people into a community college class seat.
No, I'm familiar with the training piece. I'm just saying when 46% of that number is going into career services, I don't know that I have, and I'd like to follow up with you offline on that, is what is career services? Because we're second to Alabama based on the numbers you put forward. But, I just want to make sure that we understand it as a committee, and particularly on the Workforce and Economic Development Committee, where we're spending those dollars, um, where we're overlapping, where some of the stuff you just talked about should be taught in K-12. That, the preparedness, the timeliness, everybody's focused on that.
That's just with one program. I know the 10F work program, that's
Sure.
one of the components of that. But at the same time, we're getting people prepared to go into a job interview.
Sure. But I'm just saying that's something as a state, again, looking at it holistically, that's something that your percentage of people who need that training is directly proportional to the people who didn't get it at home or didn't get it in lower education.
We're talking about the biggest clientele we work with are people that have significant barriers to the labor force or participating in that market, and it's going to be socioeconomic. So again, the low income status is going to be the biggest customer we work with.
Okay. And then as far as the 51,000 participants served, I was very interested. I think you presented a mobile center recently. Just a little bit, tell me about that.
It's the Mobile and Job Center. We had some dollars through our UI side, and we worked on that to make sure that we could, again, cover more ground. We're seeing these declining WIO dollars. So infrastructure costs, again, having dollars for rent, we're getting squeezed. So again, we can do this either a la carte. I've tasked my staff to make sure it's on a schedule. We're going to make sure that we're where we need to be, and then working with our local workforce development areas on either acute needs like a job fair, for example, or just make sure it's where we can give access.
Right. And any touch you make with an individual, you're capturing data. I mean, they're signing up for something. Is that part of the 51,000 number?
Those people, it depends on which program, but at the same time, it could be people in the UI, which again, you're required to do a work search if you want to get paid. So it crosses over a very large different swath of people. But as far as the training goes, I mean, we can always spend dollars better toward training. That's the goal. I mean, if we're number 9 now in the country, I want to make sure we can get to be number 1. But also, I need with the technology with Digital Access Center, we can centralize with call center work with some of the technology with kiosks or the navigators, what we're calling it. You punch a button and a person pops up. But yes, they're eligible for anything that they're eligible for. We're talking with them through either the Win Job Center that's mobile and a Win Job Center office counter, et cetera, or we're talking to them over the navigator.
Because from the mobile,
most of those are going to be career service.
Sure. But the mobile side of it, again, you mentioned the people that you're focused on with the career services have barriers. Well, one of those barriers may be not being able to get to Win Job Center. So we're trying to remove that barrier. But as you travel out into the world with an MDS mobile, we're hoping that is one door that actually delivers people to other services. And then the last thing, obviously, you've highlighted the decreasing dollars. The WIOA dollars are directly proportional to our unemployment rate. Is that correct? Or there's some proportionality?
It's a formulaic. And again, they're looking at areas of sustained unemployment, looking at it by county. I know we do these calculations. So what I've observed is that it looks like more people may be moving to more populated areas across the state. That could affect it. Again, it's a multi-page formula. So at the same time, about anywhere from 60 to 85% of the total dollars that we do get are going down to the local level. And again, with our 4 local workforce development areas, they're utilizing that as well. So again, if the total pie shrinks, then they struggle.
Well, no, my question is, the dollars are shrinking because unemployment in the state of Mississippi is an all-time low. It's a direct proportional.
Yes.
We haven't done anything wrong. The numbers just shrinking because we've
been good and bad at the same time. Right. It's a double-edged sword. For perspective, I know back, we're kind of dark on government data now, but at the same time, we had a report that was released 9/17/2025, about a little over a month ago. It's called the JOLTS report, so the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. It's either by industry or by state. Some of the key indicators I thought were very interesting back there in July. So July, August, we'd set a record for the most number of jobs. So that's not people, that's jobs. So, and the JOLTS turnovers beleaguered here, or I say beleaguered, it's belated, but job openings rate for that indicator was 4.6% for Mississippi. The United States was 4.3%. So we're higher than the nation as a whole for job openings rate, which means that's strong employer demand. Hires rate, more importantly, okay, so it's one thing to look, it's another thing to hire. The hires rate for the JOLTS report as of September 17 was 3.6%, and for the nation as a whole was 3.3%. So once again, we were higher than the national average on that. So that means we have efficient job matching. That means that that we're opening a job opening, and we're successfully having a hire. Again, these are micro data. This is coming from JOLTS. Again, that's job openings and labor turnover survey for July 25. Total separation. So the joyousness of hiring, well, we also have some folks we have to separate. Okay. So total separations is 3%. Now, this is lower than the national average as a whole, 3.3%. So that means stable employment, low churn. Again, it plays out in the other data that I discussed as it relates to the second quarter and fourth quarter participation rate. Okay, if you, for lack of a better term, but that's retention. And then quits rate. So people aren't quitting either. So 1.9% for Mississippi, the nation as a whole is 2%. So it's slightly lower, which is tempered worker mobility. So again, people aren't necessarily looking; they're just wanting to hold pat. If you look at some of the national data, they're talking about this. It's a no hire economy, but they're not firing. And then, of course, layoffs and discharges. Mississippi's at 0.9%, where the United States is 1.1%. Again, that's significantly, well, it's slightly lower, excuse me. But that's employer restraint, and they're focused on retention. So however we frame it, and whichever frame we're looking, it looks strong. Again, the main thing is to stay there, right? We want to be 10-0, 12-0. We want to compete for the playoffs. We want to make sure we're winning the national championship.
13-0.
Well, I think it's 15. You got to win 15 now. However many we got to win, that's what we're working on winning at MDES.
Well, but
that's the goal, is to be undefeated.
But the big thing, and again, when it goes back to policymakers and appropriators, we don't appropriate these dollars. This is federal money, and just want people to understand that the decrease is not a decrease from the state. It's a decrease from the federal government. It's not a decrease based on negative performance. It's actually a decrease based on positive performance, but nonetheless, it's a decrease. I think we're going to see this across all of government, federal, state, that we're going to need to run more lean, which is why we're trying to look at the very things that we're doing. But the other question I would ask, and the last question, I think I promise, is you have a 3-year lag to spend. The 2 years that are on the board, there seems to be significant dollars left over. Is the lag spend evident in 23 and 24 on the total spend, or is this the total amount that was spent from the actual year's dollars? Does that question make sense? Because, I mean, if I'm looking at the total amount awarded in 23, it's $31 million. Looks like the total spend is 26.5.
That's the expensed amount, yes.
All right. Well, I mean, that leaves $5 million. I'm just curious, when you said you have 3 years to spend, I would be curious what the expense was, because I'm assuming that you would spend that 3rd year lag year first to make sure we don't return it.
Yeah, we
okay.
Make sure we never return a dollar. That is correct. So I know a lot of locals can probably speak to this. I know that we're continually modifying and moving what's allowable, from whether it be adult to dislocated worker, et cetera. So it really depends on where we are as far as how we're spending. But yes, we don't leave any dollar on the table.
So my next question would be, roughly what's the rolling balance from the last 2 years? Because if I look at the sheet, 24, I mean, I'm just looking at the paperwork of a $28 million award, only 10 was expense. That's $18 million.
Yeah, can you speak to this?
It's a first in, first out approach. And so when you're talking about, we owe over 80% of the money is going to the local workforce areas. So, and I have most of them in the room here today. And so when they are doing the exact same thing of first in, first out, spending their old dollars first, and coming back. So yes, every year we all try to hold back a little money in anticipation of what shortfalls we might have. If that's what your question specifically is.
Yeah.
But there's not, so, you know, most of these expenditures were, I think, through June the 30th. So obviously we booked a lot more expenditures, since this report was produced, because we just finalized our, reports in September. So you know, when you say is there a lot of money left over, there's not a lot of money left over. I think you know, I'd have to ask the locals where they stand on some of their funding. And I know, Robin, if you want to come share some of that, you're welcome to. Yeah, and of course that is all three pots of money of adult, dislocated worker, and youth. So that's not just, you know, it's three varying pots.
And I think in my workforce area, I can only speak for mine, but I usually try to carry over about 2/3 of the new year money, just so if it does go away for whatever reason, we give the people that we're funding in the WIN Job Centers and at the colleges time to find something else. So in my area, I am frugal, and I try to spend last year's money first. I will also say the 49% that Bill talked about in our workforce area, we have about 25% in operational cost, which means it's going to rent, utilities, all of that sort of stuff. But a lot of people would call it administrative costs, but we call it operational. The rest of that goes to program. And the way that we have been able to do that is we've moved our WIN Job Centers from a standalone lease to where we're now at a community colleges. And sometimes they don't charge us anything. We actually just did a spreadsheet with all of our state agencies, and we've identified all of the empty offices that are already being paid for. And we're trying to think through, how can we not have two buildings in Macomb, Mississippi? How can we move all of the ES people to another building that MDRS already has? So we have that work already in progress. It's just taken a minute. But also with that administrative programmatic part, or operational programmatic, we partner very heavily with our community colleges, and we see what they can pay through Accelerate, and they have a lot of training that they can pay for. We have career services, and so we might classify someone as a career service, but we're actually recruiting, retaining them, and placing them, and they're getting the training through the community colleges, through WET and Works funds. So we're trying to braid funding however it sees fit. And if the colleges and Courtney's office can't pay for it, a lot of times we can pay for that, but we only classify it as a career service, not a training service, although we're getting them employed. We have about an 83% completion rate from that model.
And those are the things that obviously we want to know, because we're trying to stretch our dollars. We're trying to make it work. I guess my follow-up would be, if you showed me 22 and 21 and 20, I'm going to see total amount awarded and total amount expensed are going to match. So the spread between 23 and 24 is FIFO, is because you're just spending first in, first out. Okay. All right. Because otherwise it looks like you spent 10 of 28 in a year and a half ago appropriation, or not appropriation, but award. But basically you're saying by the end of that 3-year cycle, that number will be spent in totality. Okay. And your partners are operating the same accounting measures. Okay.
Managing our funds. I was on a call the other day where numerous states, they don't have any money. They don't have any unemployment money. They're out of WIOA money. They're out of, they're furloughing. They're doing a lot of things that, and I'm talking big states, Texas, you know, Florida. And so, you know, I feel like we do a good job of managing the resources we have and get them extremely far. And the cost of living here in Mississippi is good. And I think that's why a lot of people are relocating here. It's because a dollar tends to go a little bit farther, and that is a good thing. And I think that's why we've been successful as far as having the resources to support Mississippians across the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Let me say this, that we do the first in, first out, as he talked about. We also have the rule in our workforce area, 50%'s got to go to training. Some years we've spent as much as 60. But in the last 5 years in my area, we've took a $2.5 million reduction in funds. So the first in, first out, you manage your money. And give you an example, I had 17 WIN Job Centers 2 years ago. I have 7 today. So that 50% rule and what money, it makes you manage your funds. I don't care to tell you, I'm working on admin. I'm still working on last year's money. So I've got a year in the pot, but you've got to manage what you got. But when you get those cuts, you've got to make adjustments going forward.
I think that's a really good point, and then I'll go to you on the way that the first in, first out, and the way we spend money means the effects may not hit us right now. They're going to come though, so we've got to pay attention to that and be ready for that.
Of WIOA. Sorry. As Congress is looking at reauthorization of WIOA, I think it would be important for them to hear from states that perhaps tying funding to just an unemployment rate may not be the best pathway forward. So as states like Mississippi are looking at 20% cuts over a 3-year period, I would want that to be possibly considered as a finding of this task force. So just wanted to offer that.
Well, and based on the presentation, the economic barrier is the bigger issue than the actual unemployment rate. And if your state has potentially a population that has greater economic barriers, that seems to be where the admin's going. Not admin, but the career services is going.
Well, again, with Title II and Bronwyn, I know you'll hear from the community colleges. I mean, it's very important to have a high school degree. You know, I mean, that's like the starting. I mean, that's difficult, but it's the starting point that you have to have. So I know that those are some serious conversations in Washington. I know you've seen, I think it's an interagency agreement between Department of Education and DOL. But again, I know I can't predict anything in that faraway land. But I know that previously, maybe 2024, they talked about making sure that states went over 51% of the WIOA money designated for training. Again, we're a good steward state. I'm just telling you, our locals do an excellent job of balancing the resources and make sure that they serve the people in those areas. And compared to the nation as a whole, you know, my goal is to try to go from 9 to 1. But at the same time, though, you're still helping with the career services anyway. So, I mean, we're a very large state. As far as HR directors and different businesses, I mean, we're still educating, teaching them. And of course, with Adam, Todd, and some of our business engagement people, the main thing is getting a foot in the door, and it's very difficult. But the main thing is that we're a large geographic state, so the career services are still very important to make that market happen. Again, people are going to trust the informed source, right? So if there's a person that's working in a Wynn Job Center in a local area, and they know, and everybody knows them, they go to church, and everybody feels good about them, then they're going to vouch for a person that goes through those services at Wynn Job Center. And again, working with the locals, getting the job is very important.
All right. If Dr. Taylor, I'll let you go to the next folks if we're at that point.
Yep. One thing I would like to offer before we move forward is, Bill, I would say, don't hesitate to stay number 9 if it means we're doing right by our people. And so I want to make sure I personally get a little bit frustrated with some of the federal markers that we may move on, but may not be doing what's right. So if we have to stay 9 to do what we're doing, to do right by our people, then stay there. Don't feel that pressure.
The beauty of it is that 60 to 85% is local.
Yeah.
So our locals, I mean, they make very good decisions because they're on the ground. I can't pretend to know from this magic city of Jackson what happens in 82 counties across the state. Although I've been fortuitous, it's been fortuitous, I've got to live in a lot of them, but at the same time, I don't live there now, and people come and go, right? So it's very important to have the people on the ground that know the pulse of the people, and they know the economies, and they know the temperament, so to speak.
So as we move forward, we spend a significant amount of time on that part of the training portion of this. And Bronwyn, if you don't mind, I'm gonna move to you for a second. But I think it's important to understand that when we talk to the feds and kind of how they're moving and based on the policies that have been set forth, it really is pushing the system so that the human services pieces are set up to ensure that the people who need a job can have the services to go get a job. I don't think I'm misspeaking it or misstating that. I think as a state, we've worked really hard to better integrate our training data this year right now. So this is the first quarter. We're not there yet, but with the federal side of the house so that we can get a more complete picture of how much money we are spending on training holistically from federal or state sources. As part of that, one of the adjustments we've made involves adult ed, but I'm going to put that aside and say, Bronwyn, you guys, one of the ways I've heard it put from, and Bronwyn is with MCCB with adult education, is that you guys operate the largest high school in the state. And that always got my attention the first time I heard that. But as we've driven deeper into the data, you actually, in some cases, operate one of the largest elementary or middle schools in the state. If you look at where where participants are coming to you from, and could you take a minute and talk a little bit about kind of your data, your performance, your costs, kind of whatever moves you right now.
As Courtney said, I am with the Community College Board Office of Adult Education, and speaking on behalf of Kel Smith, our Executive Director, Jason and I are here. Jason's going to speak on the cost per student and our funding and things of that nature. I'm going to speak on our participants. So we serve last year around 8,800 individuals. For those of you that are not familiar with adult education, we work with individuals that have dropped out of high school. Those that are considered basic skills deficient. And by the federal guidelines, that is anybody that cannot read or do math on an 8th grade, right under a 9th grade level. So right at that 8th grade level. In adult education in our state, Courtney's right. We probably are more middle school, to be quite honest. I would probably say 90% of the individuals that walk through our doors do not read or do math on an 8th grade level. I mean, like right now, some of them do have a math level of, a little bit higher, but reading and math, and really probably 70% are on that below 6th grade. So we're measured on a year, from what we do, what Bill was talking about from July 1 to June 30th, how are we moving these individuals, not only a grade level, because that's how we're measured, but we're also measured if they get a high school equivalency. So to ask adult ed to get someone that comes in, the average age in our program is 27 years old. And so if they come in at a 4th grade reading level to get a high school diploma by the time they come into us at the end of the fiscal year, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's a very hard task to do. We have this last year, like I said, 8,800 individuals that walked through our doors in 23-24. Only around 6,700 of those actually stayed in our programs and progressed, but we still reported, of course, 8,800. So our performance measures are based off the 6,700 that actually walk through. So and they stay with us, what we consider a WIOA service. They get those 12 hours, they get their assessment, and they get enrolled in a class. So I would say this last year from 23 to 24, we have had some budget cuts. We've cut classes down from full-time to part-time. We have our instructors, and actually it's kind of hit us more this year, going into this 25 year, going down in our instructors and having to close classes just because of our budget cuts and what we thought was coming. And so Jason's going to speak more to the funding on all of that. But one thing that we did do this past year to show that, to help our students move faster in our programs, because we know it's all about getting them out and getting a job, was we started what's called the Total Transcript 2 years ago, and that's where they can combine their GED, HiSET, and this past year, their work keys, applied math, and workplace documents. And one thing so if you'll notice on the report here from 23 to 24, we went up from 23-24, we had 1,775 high school diplomas that were awarded last year. That's July 1 of 23 to June 30th of 24. And by incorporating the applied math and workplace documents as part of our total transcript, we went up to 2,300 this year. So that is something that we're very proud of. We think we're going to see a lot more of that this next year. And then at the bottom, our employment numbers. That is data matched with InSpark. That is something that makes us a little bit unique maybe to MDES, is that we don't have the luxury to be able to get that information on our own. So we rely on InSpark to data match everybody that leaves us. And so second quarter after exit, fourth quarter after exit, you will see, you know, in 23, 24, 59% of our students were employed second quarter after they left us. And then, of course, fourth quarter after exit, 60% were still enrolled in meeting earnings of our students. And these are not meeting earnings of individuals or even the employment are on those that got a high school diploma. These are those that actually left our program. They exit us for whatever reason. So they don't necessarily have a high school diploma. And then, of course, you know, we're measured on if they attained a recognized post-secondary ed credential while they're enrolled with us, or if 1 year after exit, and then unduplicated. So making, you know, I feel like that adult ed is on the minimum dollars that we have, you know, are making strides, but you're right. We are working with individuals that are in that middle school, you know, atmosphere, environment, that's in that space. Yes, and I didn't know if you wanted to talk on the funding part of that.
Mention two things real quick. As the chairman had mentioned earlier, between program year 23 and 25, we've taken about a $500,000 cut, and we think it really is due to bad census data. That's one of the main things. And then just I'll mention our formula is very similar to what MDES does. We have a 27-month grant, and so we manage our money pretty much the exact same way. Prior year expenditures come first. We're thankful for the legislature for some state match dollars are spent second every year, and then we hit the current year grant when we do reimbursements to our 18 programs we have right now. So, and average cost per student is about $915 per student. That fluctuates some, but right now that's about where we are. The grant does have a requirement. I'll just mention this real quick. 82.5% of the expenditures have to be on instruction, but we're running closer to 90 right now. As it, our admin and leadership costs are about 9.5% by grant. So glad to answer any questions y'all have any about that.
The $915 does that include any testing fees, or are there testing fees when somebody's trying to test into some of the things we're training them for?
So our funding dollars do not allow for us to pay for testing fees. Now, I will say the legislature last year allotted $450,000 for anybody to be able to come into a community college and take the test for free. We've worked out with GED and HiSET a voucher system, and so that has been taken care of. But we're not allowed to pay for any testing fees.
Okay. So the $915 is strictly cost. Okay. Could you touch briefly? I know you're talking about grade level, someone coming in that's middle school grade level. But are you also not receiving some people who are under the age of 18? And does that skew? I mean, is that how the system was set up from a funding standpoint? Are we getting credit, or on a credit standpoint, if you're getting 16 or 17-year-olds?
We are getting 16 to 18-year-olds, and we can take those. If they have withdrawn from high school, if they have withdrawal notice from their high school, we can enroll them in our program. They are right now about 32% of our enrollment, the 16 to 18-year-old is. And I can tell you they're outperforming the other age groups.
The concern is, and there's a big focus on absenteeism, you know, at K-12, and if you're missing, you know, 25 to 30% of your classes, you're probably more likely to drop out, but at least we seem to have performance. If we can just get them back in a classroom, life may have happened. There may be some reason they're not able to continue at the traditional K-12 model, but that is a door that is open to them to get the GED. Okay. Representative Anthony, any questions? Okay.
Okay, quick question for the student between 16 and 18 coming from that, I guess, local school district into your program. Are they considered like not enrolled in that school district and 100% under your jurisdiction. Okay.
To be.
Okay. And there's no money that's following that child to your, okay. Okay. All right.
No, the system, not your system, but the system forces them out of the high school completely before they can work with them.
But on that note, we have compulsory school attendance to what age?
16? 16?
Okay, but if that student had stayed in the school system, they would be covered as a participant in that local school district at a much higher cost than $915 from that standpoint.
Awarded from an absenteeism or truancy, but if you're
complete withdrawal.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone? All right, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Bronwyn, for that. I bring up a couple of the points about the middle school and not to highlight any challenges or anything, but also just to kind of regulate, because these are things we have learned the hard way of there's only a certain percentage that are ready to be able to train to go right to work. And so just trying to level set where we are realistically and which humans we can impact today to go to work versus which humans are going to have to stay around a little while longer. And we want them to, for lack of a better word, bake as long as they need to get the skills and get ready, but also want to be relevant.
Well, and I do want to make a point about that. The one thing that we're hearing from our local programs is that, and they do make up a large enrollment of our programs, but if a 16 or 17-year-old enrolls with us, and let's say they fast track, they get their high school diploma, and they want to go to training, there's a lot of trainings that require you to be 18 years of age to get into. And if you're 16 or 17 getting your high school diploma, that limits us on the opportunity. I mean, it's really just go to college and or CTE, which of course we want if that's what they want to do. But that's one thing to think about too, are the workforce training programs that are not allowing the 16 to 17-year-olds.
I'm really glad you said that. Because I hadn't thought about that, but that is something as we talk about the integration of data and modernizing the data, which is a critical thing. And if you really sit down and dig into the data and what it's able to do and what it's not able to do and how few national providers there are for the data, and I'm getting to a point, I promise, but how few national providers are, it's actually really concerning how bad it is. However, when we talk about integration, we also have to talk about how we're integrating the humans, just as Senator Sparks, something you've talked about when we talk about one door is when they show up somewhere, they can get all the services that they need without having to bounce around. And I think it's unfortunate, and it's something we've tried to tackle from our perspective as best we can with the training programs of why are we requiring certain things? Why are we trying to bet on sure horses when in workforce we haven't gotten to a point where we're as an office, penalizing people because people don't continue or because they're low on an English scale or whatever. But that 16 to 18 thing that she brought up is really, really important because if they are in an adult ed program at the age of 16, and I'm even encouraging everywhere we can our high schools to start doing this training. And so I think the thing I would say here on record is if you can't get a community college to provide it, I bet you can find a high school that can provide the training for a student that's not even theirs anymore. And on the workforce side, because they are starting to do that. And I think it's unfortunate that they can't walk into a workforce training program or a CTE program, but if they can't, there are other options. And I think as we're working through that, Bronwyn, remind, me and the team, and if you have specific pockets of the state where they just can't get into a program, maybe it doesn't exist, maybe they're not allowed in, maybe we can find a different training provider that we can get them to. All right. Yep. So do you. I might need a break. I'm about to roll. And as we thank y'all from the training side specifically, I'd like to take a moment and shift gears to the human services side. And I asked Samandra Ms. Murphy, this question a minute ago, but as we were talking this week with Billy Taylor, Director of Rehab Services, They're in a little bit of flux now. So as we're talking about all this human services stuff, with the shutdown, with everything, there is a potential that human services, rehab services, rehab services at the federal level actually could potentially move under DOL. And that is something that was just recently brought up this week. Is that right, Ms. Murphy?
So currently the Rehab Services Administration is under the Department of Education. As we know, there's been a lot of talks about abolishing that department. So the rumors are that it could potentially go under the Department of Labor if the Rehab Services Administration employees are not recalled back to that agency.
So that again inserts a little bit of risk, a little bit of uncertainty. The money would stay, but maybe the humans at the federal level don't. So we don't know where that's going. So I wanted to bring that up in this conversation as we talk about it. And at a high level, Billy Taylor has done a really good job of kind of talking to us about how he's working with Department of Employment Security and others. Samantha, could you give us just kind of a high level overview of where you guys are, what y'all are looking at from just kind of a tactical level and what you're seeing?
So as the role that MDRS plays in the workforce partners is, of course, our agency serves a variety of individuals with disabilities across various programs. However, the vocational rehab and vocational rehab for the blind is where we fit into the workforce component for the state. And we receive a federal grant with a 21% state match for VR services. And that's going to include job placement, counseling, physical restoration, meaning if someone had an injury and they needed a surgery that they couldn't afford, we would pay for that surgery so that they would be able to get back into the workforce. We also do, we have several facilities across our state where we provide on-site training for individuals to help them get ready for the workforce. So there's a lot of things that MDRS does from preparing individuals for the workforce, but our focus is specifically on individuals with disabilities. Last year, what RSA charges the VR program with is helping these individuals find competitive integrated employment, meaning they have competitive wages and that they're actually integrated into the workforce and not separated and given some menial tasks to do. So there were about 3,300 individuals that we placed in the workforce with competitive integrated employment. But what Mr. Taylor has focused on over the last year and trying to move the agency into is really identifying individuals who, without MDRS's help, would not enter the workforce. Because what we've looked at over the past 5 or 6 years or so is that somehow the focus has shifted to a lot of post-secondary ed training where we're paying for college for individuals with ADHD or anxiety, and those individuals can qualify and be eligible for our services. But what we're trying to do is do more outreach to identify those who would not even be seeking employment because of their disability without our services. So that shift is happening from Mr. Taylor, and he's pushing that down to our employees, and we're actually holding eligibility training to get our counselors more versed in what it looks like for an individual who would simply not enter the workforce would it not be for MDR. So that's kind of where we're shifting our focus to. Not to say that we can't serve the individuals that we were serving in the past. We just want to make sure that we're playing our part from a state perspective and finding unemployed individuals who would not enter the workforce without MDRS and getting them competitive integrated employment.
Do you all have, and not from a money perspective, because there's never enough money, right? But as you're going out and trying to find those humans that need that assistance to get to work, do you know if there's have you identified any efficiencies that maybe we could do as a state to better help you all find those people? If we have career coaches around the state at the community college level, at the high school level, like, have y'all thought about that at all, or are we doing any of that?
We do have a lot of partnerships. Some of the school districts, we have MOUs, and then we have what we call pre-employment transition services. And so those are students who are not currently entering the workforce or not technically preparing for the workforce, but we go into the school system and work with the schools and the students and their parents to get them the training or services that they might need before it's actually time to start preparing them for the workforce. So I think we do have a really good partnership with the school systems, which we're working to strengthen that. But I can't personally speak to where we might be able to. I would have to give that some thought.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Representative Anthony or Senator Sparks? Yes.
I love what you're saying about targeting those who otherwise would not be in the workforce. I will note for the committee, Mississippi's made great progress on labor force participation in terms of growth. We're still about 6.5 percentage points below the national average. So I think that means like you're targeting people and growing the pie. I'm interested in how y'all do that. So how do you identify someone that you think, but for our assistance, this person would not be in the workforce?
So that's the challenge. That's the question we're asking ourselves, and that work is really just starting. So we're looking at like what kind of public relations communications we need to be doing. Are there grassroots efforts that need to take place? A lot of our services are word of mouth, and so like what communities do we need to become a part of to get the word out about the services that MDRS provides? I mean, from a personal perspective, I'm from Holmes County, and I go home and visit my parents and see people that I went to high school with like standing out on the streets, and I'm like, why are you not working? Like, what are you doing? And so I think that a lot of some of the work that we're going to have to do is to figure out how do we reach these people and what are the reasons they're not currently engaged in the workforce, and is that something that MDRS can be a part of?
That survey that you speak of.
And I do want to say in talking with you and Dr. Taylor on more than one occasion that I do appreciate your prioritization of funding. You guys were facing a major potential shortfall earlier this year, and fortunately that I think came through. But without, I'm certainly not medically trained, but without getting into diagnoses, there are categories of services for categories of people. And it goes back to something I said to this task force on the front end. If we're just filling out the paperwork and hoping we qualify, and that's who we fund, we're missing the point, because the opportunities that are available for some people are not available for others, or the challenges are greater. And when you're operating rehab services and you're dealing with people with disabilities, you know, I want to be careful how I say this, because all disabilities are real, but we're diagnosing a whole lot more than we used to, and there are challenges that are greater for some people, and that's where the focus should be. And I appreciate your agency being willing to do that.
Thank you. Ready? Moving on. Hello. How you doing, Ms. Shanetta? Moving on to all things DHS, and before you get into data, Ms. Strone, could you talk just at a high level, just for I guess the record, on the payment error rate situation that's coming up and that's still coming, as I understand it, just at a high level? One of the things that changed this year was which bill? There's a new bill that changed from changed the payment error rate calculation to where the states now have to provide a cost share for some of these funds based on the payment error rate.
Right. So the One Big Beautiful Bill did include language that effective October 1st, 2027, state agencies will be required to fund a portion of state benefit cost based on their SNAP quality control payment error rates. So if that error rate exceeds 6%, which is the threshold, there's a graduated percentage state match that is required. Currently, which the most recently calculated payment error rate for Mississippi is for 2024, and our error rate is 10.69%. So based on that error rate, Mississippi would be required to pay, I believe, 10%, 10% state match for SNAP EBT benefits. Now, what states do have the option of is whether or not they want to use their federal fiscal year 25 payment error rate or their federal fiscal year 26 payment error rate. We are opting to use 26.
Shanetta, as you guys have operated across this and the report that that you put in, you've distributed approximately 1.85 billion in SNAP benefits, or an average of about $850 million a year. That's for the past 2 fiscal years. I guess you guys run on a 2 fiscal year average, or is it?
It's easier to calculate it on an average, just because of the variances, and you always have people who fall back and forth in. So it's difficult to isolate distinct households.
Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit about any efforts you guys have undertaken to reduce your administrative costs as you're looking at this, or even the efforts you guys are making on your SNAP error rate at a high level? I know we're early on in that, but.
Yes, let's just jump straight to the elephant in the room. Absolutely. So with one thing I do want to highlight is that the SNAP payment error rate is not reflective of fraud. Some things that can contribute to your error rate is a client's failure, oftentimes unintentionally, to report a change in income, complete income reporting, bank accounts, our client-based errors, and we still are penalized for those. Other examples could be that our eligibility specialist did not calculate, human error, did not calculate payments correctly, which resulted in them either receiving an overissuance of SNAP benefits or an underissuance of SNAP benefits. Your sample that is pulled is very small, so it's not reflective of our entire population. I'll give you an example that is very real. One of our most recent monthly error rates that our internal SNAP QC team calculated has us significantly below 6%. 2 or 3 months prior to that, we were at 14%. And it's less than 10 people included in that sample. So some of the things that we are looking at that we do know can contribute significantly is having access to income verification systems. And the benefit of those is it does remove some of the need to have a client self-report income. It gives us access to income data through several different companies in that space. We do have several zero-cost pilots. One is active in 2 counties. We're in conversations with 5 other vendors who are offering up 6 months pilots. We have submitted for federal grant funding for income or earnings verification systems. We were awaiting award notifications. We were very positive prior to the shutdown. So that's one of the biggest, lowest hanging fruits is if we do have funding to be able to purchase our own earnings verification systems would be beneficial. The other thing that we're doing is retraining our staff. It's important that they do know how to calculate a budget correctly so that we are not issuing benefits incorrectly is the goal. Administrative cost-wise, we're in the process of looking at how we can make our operations for SNAP as lean as possible without compromising program integrity.
Shanetta, you said a whole lot there that I want to make sure everybody understands the significance of. One of the things that you started and the others, MDES and other agencies have also indicated is since over the last few years, I should say, we've had a significant turnover in government. for many reasons, right? Government doesn't pay what industry pays, people move out, whatever. But that turnover is inducing risk at a pretty fast pace at this point into all of our organizations in government. Talking about the training, I wanted to highlight that because that is something that the agencies as a whole in the WIOA group have indicated is a priority, and there's a subcommittee working on that. Because even what you're talking about here is just being technically proficient at calculating all of these things. But what we're also talking about, Senator, is the ability to know enough about the other opportunities and the other entities that without a one agency, one door, whatever, that everybody can know enough to guide the person to the next. So, oh, I also have this issue. If they come to you and they need a surgery, to the example that you said earlier, so that they can get back to work. Okay, we'll connect them over there. So I applaud those efforts. I also know that we're a long way from getting all that right, but everybody's trying. So I really appreciated that. And the other thing I wanted to go back to is this income verification system, which really is another point of data integration and modernization that we don't currently have. And it's a little bit mind-boggling probably to the average person that's like, wait a minute, so we've just been trusting them until we get the data in the past, and it's like, well, that's pretty much how it is. So I applaud the efforts, especially because you said the word free, and I'm assuming free means high quality. So you're working on those. Is that included in your? You said you're going to a grant. Is there funding for that? Like, how does that work outside of maybe that competitive grant that you're working on?
With the zero cost pilots that we have, it's a benefit or a win-win for a lot of vendors in that space, especially as they are rolling out new products, to have a state that's willing to test it and give them live feedback. And so I've been very open that I am vendor agnostic, but I am more than willing to help them test their products because it does give our eligibility specialists and our clients access to systems and technologies that right now we can't afford. And while doing that, we also looked at what are some private and federally funded 100% opportunities, and we've applied for several of those as well. One of the vendors that we were working with did apply for a public benefit innovation trust funding for 5 states, and Mississippi was one of those. And they were recently awarded the funds, which that technology will allow us to have some AI and other things around work requirements. So we are exploring all of our options from a fiscal perspective, as well as just what technologies can help streamline our processes. And that part's very important because we are in the process of a technology modernization. So the systems that our eligibility specialists currently working in, when I talk about our eligibility specialists making errors, their systems are very old. And some of our errors are just based on how old that system is. If it freezes when they're in the process of inputting information, if that system freezes, they have to start over. And that increases the risk of them inputting something wrong that they may have gotten right the first time, as an example.
Thank you for that. One last follow-up on that, but really it's to everybody on the income verification systems. Is that something that is needed or currently utilized in any other agencies to validate benefits? Rehab service, do y'all have to do that? But y'all don't get penalized if their income is wrong. Not like that. Y'all don't either. And y'all have your okay.
I am baffled by that. I think it is obscene that we're taking the word of somebody walking in off the street and we've been allowed to do that. That's a failure of the federal government. That's why they're $38 trillion in debt, and it's why our budgets will be cut in the near future. So I am as upset about this issue as anything that I have seen of fiscal irresponsibility and data irresponsibility across state and federal government. Because you said it's a 10% error. That sounds good. What does that mean in real dollars? It's 126 million. Is that correct?
At about 128 million.
Okay.
Was estimated.
That's annually. That's annually. If we're deemed in that error rate, that is a humongous number in the state of Mississippi. You talk about adult ed, we spend what? 6 million from state dollars? I mean, you just pick your poison. If it's $128 million hit to the budget, everybody cutting income taxes, everybody cutting this, cutting that, we don't have a choice. This is the federal government will say this money comes back to you. So I don't mean to throw a dark cloud on this meeting, but that came out in JLBC because I had misunderstood. We have a cost sharing that is required of every state for the admin costs. That was also part of the bill, but that was where there was some confusion that we thought, oh, for me, there was some confusion that we're going to take a hit, but we're going to take a hit on the error rate. That's completely different. That's not a tremendous amount of money. We're going from some percentage of admin to a higher percentage of admin. Is that correct?
From 50% to 75% will now be the state share admin.
And that's all 50 states. That's not punitive.
All
it's
50
not anything
states.
else.
Correct.
So I guess my question, I think every one of our state agencies better be having the same conversation about income verification, because if it's coming to y'all, it's coming to other people later. So as a state, let's not do the dumb thing and get one system for one agency and get another one for every other agency. But if you've got vendors that are willing to test market us, why wouldn't we do all five and say, y'all compete, but then I want to compare your math? Because the ultimate question I've got, how much do you need dollars wise? Because if it's less than 128 million, it sounds like a good investment.
Significantly less than 128 million.
I figured it
Yes.
was.
Yes.
But the second piece to that, is there any guarantee from that third party administrator? In other words, is the federal government going to look at the fact that the state of Mississippi invested ever how many dollars it takes to get to that point of having a good, solid income verification system? Because I want to be very fair. The spread, the miss, and as you stated, doesn't matter if I gave you a little too much or a little too less. The spread was thin. It was like just a few dollars. I mean, on income verification. So it's not like we're making some gross error. It's a literal small thing plus a sample size. But as you work with these vendors, is there a possibility, because the vendor is going to be confirming income on every applicant, correct?
Correct.
So we would have a data set that if they come draw a sample size from the state of Mississippi and tell us we're at 11%, and this is the lawyer in me coming out, I'm trying to look how to defend this. If we have the data that shows in our system that our error rate is actually 7%, which is still over the threshold, but it cuts our penalty from about 128 to about 40 something. I mean, it's an $80 million swing. So I appreciate what you're doing, but I cannot stress enough, this may be one of the most important things we deal with in the next 12 months, because that's our measuring year. So thank you for what you're doing, but I don't know when we knew this, if this came out of HB1, but that is a major change. And I know there's a ton of other states that are in the same boat we're in or worse, but if we've got vendors willing to come to the table, we need to collect that data. And I would just encourage everybody else to probably look and see how we can dovetail off of it, because we may end up with the same situation.
Right. And I just want to clarify, to be fair to those vendors, they are not making their systems available in all 82 counties. These are small pilots in very targeted, specific areas of the state, because we isolated which counties are contributing the most to our payment error rates.
Okay, I would love to have that information as well, but
You are working with multiple, right?
There are multiple. We have one pilot that's live. We have one that, when I get back to my office, I'm going to sign that agreement so we can get that pilot started. And two, that we're in conversations on how those pilots can look. And the expectation that we've set for them, of course, that a zero-cost pilot is not a guarantee of a contract, but that once we do secure funds, we would do a small competitive bid just so that we can try to get the absolute best pricing.
and the final question on that, and you may not know this at this time, and that's fine. But again, I go back to if we have a vendor who you say they did the best, we put it out for bid, they're reasonable in the price range. Is there any money back guarantee assurance from this third party vendor who's coming in to do exactly what we're asking them to do? Don't have errors, stay within the variance, keep us below 6%, because 6% is still allowing for some error. I would be very interested in that, because if they sell us a product and we're at 9.9, we've really not experienced much of a gain. But again, if they're able to deliver data sets across the spectrum, and our sample size is a luck of the draw, because unfortunately it is,
Yes.
that we'd be able to go back and present something to the federal government in defense to say, while you happen to pick the sample size that was unfortunate, here's our totality. So, I mean, I'm willing to spend money to save $128 million annually, but thank you. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
Okay, I want to stay on the payment error rate. All right. Mr. Chairman, you had the question I had, which is how much is that 10%? So let's just say 128 million. You mentioned the selection of the 2026 baseline. So that will not be the 10.69% number, but the following year.
2 years later.
2 years. Now, this is memory, and I could be wrong, probably. What is it? Often wrong, never in doubt. But so it looks like that for the past few years, the payment error rate has just increased. And so is it your agency's belief that using the 2026, this will be a lower payment error rate and possibly less for the state to participate in terms of a share? And if so, what factors are y'all doing that might lead to that?
It has to be a lower error rate. My target is 8% on the record for 2026. And some of the things that I have discussed are included in what our plans are, and that is having access to independent earnings verification, retraining our staff. We will have a new system in 2027, which will help at least a portion, not for that FY26, but going forward. But as we do the work with our new system, we're identifying some gaps or systems related causations and doing what we can to correct those now.
And what about your reporting, change reporting, simplified? I've seen maps where Mississippi is the only state in the nation that is change reporting only. So can you speak to that maybe a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So with change reporting, of course, that increases the number of times a SNAP recipient is required to report that change in income. And the more times they are required to report a change in income increases the risk that they may fail to do so, which then, if the luck of the draw, to the chairman's point, if that case is selected, that is an error for us.
Okay.
Simplified.
Okay. Thank you, Shana. I appreciate it.
Just one, and you may or may not know this, but assuming 26 is the measurement year and we're trying to implement and get all these things up and running, and we still have a penalty number, is it measured annually? In other words, would 27 also be measured? How long are we stuck with the 26 number?
That guidance has not been provided. Based on what information is available to us today, the expectation that states have right now is that it would be evaluated every year.
So potentially, if we get our systems in place, and again, I'm being very defensive over $128 million, is if we show a pathway of mitigation, if you will, of the error rates, that we're able to offset that and not take that kind of lick to the Mississippi budget. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I say one more thing just for awareness? You may have said this, but so the 6% or lower payment error rate, that is the point at which states would not have to participate in that. And I think there is not a single state or maybe just one that is currently within that. So I just wanted for this conversation to know that Mississippi is not unique. That is kind of an aggressive target, but just for awareness.
Thank you, Shanetta. Having lots of fun here, aren't we? Moving on, switching gears a little bit, there are some other data elements that we're working with different agencies on, some that aren't on this task force, specifically Medicaid and some others. So we don't have those today to talk about. So that's really it for the kind of the data agency, the data of agency responses, unless anybody has any follow-up, anything they want to talk about now before, so we really don't have that much left to discuss, just kind of the report and the things required by the law. But wanted to give everybody a chance to speak if you haven't spoken about this topic. I do appreciate the work the agencies are doing to navigate all this and working with us to try to figure out how we integrate this better and get more people into our training programs. See what we can do there. So as we move forward, the law that the legislature passed this year indicated that we had to have a report turned in December based on the findings. And so we are working through that with this data and kind of trying to navigate all of the kind of wildness that's in the system right now. But we've put together just kind of an overview of the data elements, and I wanted to kind of see what mattered to the task force. Obviously, we have findings that have to be discussed, and that will have to be at the next meeting and realistically adopted to meet the deadline set by the law at the next meeting. So we'll need to have some discussions between now and then. But overall, the report structure that we're looking at, I know y'all don't care about report structure, but these are the elements that we are currently talking about putting into this. So I need the task force to let me know if there's things that we're not including that you think should be included, or things that we are including that you don't think are relevant based on your experience and your concerns. But obviously an executive summary and introduction, just kind of the general introduction of the purpose of the report, which would align with the purpose of the task force as it's been set forward. The vision of the workforce development system, which I have a lot to say about that in my role at the state, but starting to work through this very simple desired future state, which I think you have indicated pretty clearly based on the name of the current task force. But we would need to look at that as what do we really want out of the system and what are those goals? We have the very real things like Ms. Drone is talking about and challenges that they're confronting, but that doesn't take away the need to kind of re-envision the system as a whole. I don't think I know that we've worked extensively over the last, 3 or 4 years on the training side of the house. And I think we've got that mapped pretty well, but how it directly connects to the human services side of the house, I think is still a weakness. So that would be a finding. And again, that's not an indication of a weakness of individuals. It's just the system is the system at the point. Looking at the customer access pathways in summary, how people are getting into the services and how the referral process currently works entity by entity. And the focus of this is obviously the agencies, but there's a point really quickly where we've got to make sure we're also bringing that back down into the WIN job centers and the local workforce development areas. Looking at the cross-agency alignment and service structure to kind of see, where are we aligned, where are we not aligned, and potentially even identify some places we can go ahead and integrate now. And one of the joys that I have had over the last few months in meeting with some of the directors of the agencies is they get to talking about things I have no idea what they're talking about. And then they'll identify things. Oh, well, we're doing that this way. You can do that this way. And so I think there's a lot that's currently being gleaned and things that I want to make sure we get into the document, very frankly, and get it memorialized that a lot of this, some of this work is happening already, and our agency directors are working through that. What does the structure look like? What does the alignment look like? The big one, I think, is going to be in the technology and systems. Every conversation we have ends up boiling down to We have really great technology out there in theory as a nation. We're not necessarily using all of that. In some cases we are, in some cases we have what we can afford and what makes sense to us. But I do think the technology and the systems and the opportunities to integrate those across systems is a critical component of what you talk about, in my opinion, when you get to the one door task force. Moving on, obviously the performance metrics and results. I think we have what I consider to be the bare minimum and what we all have to do to receive any kind of funding. But I think as we've looked at it, is there a place where we can, identify data gaps, and is there a place, and does it make sense at all to unify any of the data reportings to make it easier to read? We've talked some about insights and how do we give people insights to the reporting, because if I tell you that 92% of the workers went to work and we met our federal target, but they're working and making less money due to either the region they're in or the jobs we were training them for, that's not necessarily included. And so that's the kind of stuff we want to get to. And again, this is just this go into basically recommendations, because we can't do all this in 5 months, just so we're clear. But we can get it memorialized and look forward as to what we need to continue. As a employee of the State Workforce Investment Board, we're trying to tackle this as much as we can to move this forward. Federal and state appropriations and dollars, comparative funding, and kind of the fiscal insights. Guy's working on that committee. He's gone now, but that's been an interesting jaunt to look at the federal for human services mostly, and then the state even for training and state dollars. And then final recommendations, which would, I think, be the crux of the report, which would be proposed actions that Mississippi should take, or, take next steps on at least. So that's kind of the goal of the report, but I know that's a mouthful and a lot, but are there things that y'all didn't hear that you think should be included? And of course, my email, my phone, open season as we're considering this.
Sounds really thorough. Me.
I think you covered definitely the broad strokes. Obviously, your email is open for people that have something in specificity. I will say, of course, Representative Otis Anthony is with us from the House chamber, and I think Cole and Aaron both from the Speaker's office are here. If specifically, I'll wait till the end and let Representative Anthony ask anything he wants to. But Cole, anything y'all have? All right.
So process-wise, and again, trying to be a good girl here on the data, on the law, which is not my norm, sir. But it's due, I think, December 1st. How would y'all like to provide a draft copy of the report for review for a week or so before we get back together? Do we want to have a virtual, how do we want the next phase of this to go? Because we're going to have the report by early to mid-November. And so we want to give everybody time to think logically and tactfully about this, but y'all got a recommendation for how you want us to handle that?
I would suggest if it's something to be reduced to writing in the next, couple of weeks, that could be circulated to all the board members and they could have a chance to offer feedback to maybe add something or clarify something. I think that would probably be the best way, and then maybe have a virtual meeting after people have had a chance to look at it, I guess, to give input on why they think something should be added or modified. That seems to me, if somebody else has a different suggestion, I'm willing to certainly listen.
Is a week sufficient
to review?
Mm-hmm.
I would think so.
I would think so. I know you have the upcoming holidays to consider too. So
yep,
depends on your consultant.
We're going to meet on Thanksgiving Eve. I'm just kidding.
Well, as long as there's food, I'll come, even if it's,
Sorry.
I feel it excuse me. I feel it prudent that we look at it before it goes out. So
yeah. So maybe probably just realistically based on the time frame, that maybe the week of the 15th for a virtual session. We'll get as soon, and the dates may have to back up, but I think the law specifically calls out December 1st. So I'm trying to meet that with maybe an actual meeting on December 1st to review and determine if we're going to adopt it as a task force or not, if that works. December 1st. I know everybody has. Oh, that's right. That's right. We'll look at the dates. We'll chat about those offline then. But basically we'll work to get you a week to review, and then have a follow-up meeting for the task force to determine whether it's going to adopt the document. Okay. That is all I have for our agenda.
Representative Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to just say thank you all for your spirit of cooperation across agencies, across chambers. We're working together, and across party lines. I was sitting there listening to some of the presentations, and I can't help but to think about home for me, and that is the Mississippi Delta. But I also pastor a church over in Holmes County, over in Lexington, and so I go from the Delta to the hills, and the stories are the same. We are working on frameworks where opportunities as well as challenges sometimes sit on the same street, but they are across from each other. And the work that we're doing now is not just looking at frameworks, but there are some faces behind the files. And you're all on the front line and you see those faces. Because some of the challenges that we see, how do we get young people who want that opportunity to provide an adequate job so they can support their young families? How can those fathers get a second chance at doing the work that they can to support their children? Or how can that single mother get that training that she needs to better herself? That's the work that we're doing. And so I just like the spirit that we have with this committee, and I want to thank our chairmen for leading that effort, because when we talk about aligning data systems and building these systems out, there was some good information, especially from MDHS. We got to figure out a way where hope and help is housed under one roof. That's the work that we're doing. That's the commitment that we should all have, especially in our final report. So thank you all for the spirit of cooperation. Thank you for the data that you have shared with us. And I want to thank our chairman for chairpersons for their leadership, and just thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Representative Anthony. And I think echoing that, I do appreciate the work you're doing. I know it's not all comfortable. It's not meant to be. I appreciate how hard y'all are fighting the issue that we talked about to try to get that error rate correct. And my frustration certainly not with the people sitting in these chairs. The frustration is that we got here and that nobody was paying attention until the federal government said it's going to cost you money. And that's why with Mr. Taylor, at Rehab Services, they were moving before they thought they were going to lose money. And I remember his words. He said, it's the right thing to do, even if we had the funding. That's what I'm looking for. It's the right thing to do. Even if we had the money, we still need to be lean. We need to be a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars and impact. And I'll go one step further. We're just touching the top. The assumption is all the people we're talking about are willing participants. All the people we're talking about. But if someone is in a GED program at 16 to 18 years old, 90+% of those, that was not a choice. There was some life event. I looked on social media this morning, and one of my counties, it was the arrest list from October. It's Schedule 2, Schedule 2, Schedule 2, Schedule 2. It's methamphetamine arrests. That's who we're trying to get into the workplace. And I can't just drag you into a GED class if you're addicted to methamphetamine, because you're probably not going to be very effective. There's bigger pieces to this than just the agencies we're dealing with. We've got an opioid settlement dollars that are coming to the state of Mississippi that we won't. There's another committee that's dealing with that to try to properly apply those dollars so that we can get you better candidates that are Mississippians, that are more likely than not on somebody's rolls, receiving some type of benefit from the state of Mississippi, who are capable, but for getting past their barriers. So our challenge is great, but it's our challenge. Somebody else is not going to come solve it for us. So I do appreciate everyone and the work you're doing. Dr. Taylor, Jeremiah, doing the things, everybody across the board. But thank you. And I will also note, and I would like to note for Chairman Bell, this meeting started at 8:30 promptly. The meeting was to end at 10:30, and unless there's anything else, my clock says 10:20. We didn't take a break, so y'all earned your 10-minute departure. So unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.